Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. With your host, Stu OG Industry Shannon and Will warren-davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
G'day guys, welcome to another episode of the Wot Supp podcast. We've got a guest on today that I've been wanting to get on for some time. It is Troy Bremner, the man behind International Protein. So he's the co-owner of International Protein. He's been doing this since 2001, I believe, is when International Protein started. But we've got him on here today to pick his brain about, I guess, building a brand, building a mega company, building something that that people want to use around the country. And this is a protein brand now that pretty much any supplement store you walk into in Australia, you're going to see International Protein. You know, it's everywhere. The range has just expanded and expanded. Even in my time in the industry, I started in about 2009, and I've seen the range expand dramatically. So
it's a pleasure to be on.
Yep, and we've also got my regular co-host, Will. So, you know, up bright and early, Will. Thanks for coming on, mate.
No, mate, always a pleasure. I prefer them this time of the day. We can crack into things without distractions. We can get some good content on before we even start the day, which is a plus. And I think we're going to have some cracker stuff today because I think we've got, you know, a rare guest that we've got, you know, multi-decadal experience in this sort in our industry and a big part of our listener base. Troy is, you know, retail store owners,
Yep.
people, you know, small business owners, people who are aspiring to be small business owners or who want to start their own business. And I think the insight that we can hopefully pick your brain on today for someone who's been doing this for 20 odd years would be invaluable for those people listening who are going, you know, I want to start, I don't know how, you know, and we're, you know, they're sort of looking at the bottom of the mountain, looking at the top. And any gems we can chat about today, I'm sure they'll think is absolutely gold. So
yeah, well, that's probably
obviously for a lot of people that first step is always the hardest step to take. You know, the step off the edge of the cliff as such.
Yeah, so let's rewind back to I guess the first spark for you. Like, where does International Protein start? Were you lying in bed one night and woke up with a you know, profound dream, or where did it all begin? Run us through the story, Troy. I want to hear it from the very first moments.
Okay, so the way International Protein started is I was in Melbourne, so was Christine. We were both fairly well known in the bodybuilding scene, me more watching and her more on the stage as such. But at that time, she was a food scientist for Uncle Toby's, and there wasn't a lot of products. This was back in the Weeder 10,000 days and Balance. There were really only 3 brands on the market, Masashi, Balance and Weeder, with Nutrilife being part of Weeder as such. If you didn't buy them, there were no other brands. And at that time, the products, they were functionally very good, but biochemists were making the products, not food scientists. So the flavour aspects of the products hadn't really come up to par then. And there was myself, Christine, and probably about another 15 bodybuilders that we were all friends. We used to train at the gym every Saturday, Sunday, go over to Doherty's and do a leg session and a back session as such. And when we were getting ready for shows, Christine used to actually buy the whey off Fonterra and flavour it herself and add you know, glutamine to it, add some arginine if it was WPI, and make what she would consider to be her ultimate tasting but also performing sports supplement. Then people were talking about it to shops, and when we seen shops, back in those days, bodybuilding was very vibrant. So you'd go to an event and there were 12, 15, 20 sponsors out the front of the event, all shop owners. You know, it was a good time to be involved in the industry, but also the sport. It wasn't like now where you go and there's one guy at the front, but he's gone to the toilet and you never get to actually speak to him. So the shop owners started saying, hey, everybody's telling us that, you know, you're making this whey from it. At that time, we weren't charging anybody. We were just, you know, we were splitting the cost of a bag. That was the product. And, you know, there were a few guys like Ian from Evelyn Faye who really gave us the confidence. Hey, some of the boys let me taste your stuff. If you launch this we'd be happy to stock it. You know, there's a bit of a story in that. Ian didn't stock me for the first 5 years after I launched, but still, he gave me the confidence to make the step. You know? But at that time, one of our friends who lived in Queensland had shifted to Thailand and had opened up a small chain of gyms there. And he was one of the guys who used to, take the powder. And he was like, look, there's no protein powders at this time in Thailand, because that was before they passed the law that you're allowed to use artificial sweeteners there. So at that time, nobody wanted a protein powder with 25% cane sugar in it, because obviously the nutritionals become fairly bad for a sports person. So that's where the name International Protein come, because originally we were going to launch it in Thailand with this guy Bart, but about 6 weeks before launching, we made all the formulas, printed labels, all sorts of stuff. He said, I've been offered by Adidas to go to China and open up a chain of Adidas gyms in China, and they're offering me 6 figures a month.
Yeah,
you go, sorry guys, I'm going to have to let you down and go. And we're like, yeah, look, totally understand. Like, it's probably going to take us 2 years before we pay you a wage. So,
no brainer, really.
Yeah. So then we sat there for about six weeks with the labels, the brand, and everything ready to go, saying, oh, geez, that sort of fell flat. And, you know, we've got about, at that time, probably about $18,000 worth of labels and some packaging and all sorts of stuff. And then Christine said, well, I'll set up the accounting and everything and show you what to do. But do you want to get out and sell it? Because, you know, you're a bit of a networker and everybody knows you. And that's that big step that you have to take. I'm like, why would anybody want to buy it off me? I'm not a sports supplement guy. I'm just a trainer. All those sort of nervous things. So about 6 weeks after that, we actually went to a company called Adidas at the time that was ran by Fred Mears, who had been a friend of Christine's through doing stuff through Uncle Toby's. It later become OmniBlend. When they were bought out, and Fred was nice enough to look at our formulas and say, yeah, I can make that for you, give me your labels. And about probably 8 weeks after that, we had stock back in the garage at home as such, and had to start to drive around the shops. And shops never heard of the brand. Why would I want it? What are you doing? So the first 50 shops probably took me about 7 to 8 months to sign up, and really hard work. It was like you're asking a Chinese family for the firstborn son as such. I used to like Christ guys and then but to be honest, from 50 shops, the market started really taking off, and it was in a boom period for supplements. From 50 shops to about 250 shops, I didn't have to go visit a shop. People started ringing saying, hey, I heard the guy down the road stocking it. I've had people ask for it. And then honestly, from 500 shops to about 3,200 shops. At that, when we got to about the 502 shops, I was doing all the sales, doing the local deliveries, doing all the dispatch myself. I didn't have anybody else work in the warehouse or anything. Just become a little bit much. So,
so you were a busy man at that point in time.
Yeah, well, I used to have that joke. I'm one of those people. If my phone rings, I answer it. And I used to have other reps say, "Oh, he's a difficult account. I don't ring him back." I said, "Mate, but you shake your phone and money falls out. That's the way sales works. If the phone rings, it's going to be money. And even if it's not money and it's a complaint, if you handle the complaint well, you can build rapport, and that turns into money down the track. So what are you doing as a sales rep?" And I wasn't a trained sales rep. So for a lot of trained people that I dealt with that had gone through sales courses and that, I was surprised at their lack of work ethic when it comes to actually doing the job they're employed for.
That's sorry to interject, mate. That's a really, let's just dwell on that for a second, because we look at God, like you're dead right, treating that as an opportunity for a poor build, because we touched on this last episode quite a lot, where a lot of this boils down to just relationship, and because the nature of when small business starts is that it quite often becomes a roller coaster, and when it gets that nice stage where it starts building momentum and snowballing, quite often it's almost an overwhelming workload when it happens. But one thing I was always very impressed with is even running, and I don't think a lot of people in Australia understand, have a true scope of of the size of your operation there. But when I had done some work with you previously and had and give you a call, I could imagine how much you'd fit into a day. You'd still answer it regardless. Whereas I have other smaller factories who can't answer a phone, who are running probably 1/5 the size of the operation, and it makes you appreciate just that lesson that if you just show up, that's 90% of it. Hey, like if you just
100%. As in, I quite often say this. Twice I've won the Gold Coast Business of the Year award, so I've sort of been lucky there. But I've probably picked years when, I was an easy win because I've had some growth and it's been COVID hit or something like that. But still, it looks good on the wall. Yeah, and when you get up to give the speech and people give these amazing speeches before me, I just get up and say, really, good business is just good manners. If somebody rings, answer the phone. If somebody's got a problem, listen to it. If you can fix it for them. If they're being unreasonable, just be honest and say, you're setting the bar a little bit high. Like all of us have to make money, and if you want gift with purchase and no margin and a discount and this, I may as well not do the sale. If it's going to cost me $2,000 to sell you the product, they'll just not sell you the product. So, but what you find, especially in this industry, even though we're sort of going on a segue here, is a lot of reps on the road or a lot of businesses don't like conflict. And unfortunately, part of sales will end up being conflict in one way or another. Somebody undercuts a shop, somebody brings out a product that's a little bit cheaper, they want it cheaper, So you have to learn to deal with that conflict and not let it beat you down, and you do the best you can. And sometimes you just have to say no. Like, we export to 16 countries and I could probably export to 28 countries, but none of the other countries I could cut a deal that was going to make me money. In fact, it was going to, some of the countries, the orders would be so big it'd tie up about 30% of my production capacity, but for a break even. So whilst I'd be bragging to you guys about the $20 million I sold this month, unfortunately the accountant would be ringing me saying, guys, you're running to break even. Make sure you don't break it up or you've lost money. But there's a lot of the secrets of business is just good manners. If somebody rings, answer the phone. Like the last thing you want to hear, and this will be for anybody starting a business, if you have an employee where somebody rings and says, I rang them 9 times and they didn't answer, and you ring in there and say, it was going to be a painful phone call because we did this wrong, you probably need to really pull that employee aside and say, if it ever happens again, mate, you're out of the business, because the person, by the time they've rang you the 9th time, the problem that they originally had is no longer the problem. The problem that you're ignoring them is a bigger problem, and you'll probably never fix that rapport. Where some of the accounts that I've got the best relationship with, maybe they're hard to deal with, effervescent sort of guys. They're sort of going, but and I've done extremely well in their local area, and they might ring up and they're swearing down the phone, and this is the problem, that's the problem. So, well, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do because I'll be losing money, and that's the honest truth of it, guys. That's where we stand. Can we move forward from here? And I find being truthful with them, even if they don't like it at the time, ends up winning month after month, because people who tell them what they want to hear at the time and then don't deliver tend to lose that account where you build trust. So
as a retailer, I've had this experience with reps, and there's nothing more frustrating for me than being given a soft approach answer that's incorrect. Like, when are we going to have stock? Should be in next week, Stu, should be in next week. Well, they know very well it's not going to be until next month, Whereas, like, there is an account, there's a distributor that I deal with that's very good at being brutally honest. There's a really popular product in Australia right now that's an imported product from the US, and it's been out for months. But they told me when it went out of stock that it won't be back till late February at the earliest. This was back in September. So I'm not there, twiddling my thumbs going, when's it coming? Maybe it'll arrive today, telling customers, it should be in next week. We'd rather just get the truth. I was frustrated when I was told it's not going to be until late February, but it is what it is. They're doing their best. They want the product in. They want to make the sale. And another thing that I found interesting about what you said just before, Troy, about the the conflicts and the complaints and that sort of thing. I think they're going to happen in any business. But something that was told to me about 10 years back was that if you're getting you learn more about your customers from your complaints than you will from your positive feedback. And for every customer that is complaining about a specific issue, there's 10 customers who had that same issue, but just didn't tell you and went and shopped somewhere else.
And all of us feel it. Like, let's say chocolate WPI, I might sell 3 kilo, 14,000 a month in the 3 kilo tubs. And we would be lucky to get 2 complaints in a year. But I still now, after 20 years, that email comes in and you're like, what? You red line. You're like,
You what?
get the factory stuff
The
up here,
chocolate
what's going on?
WPO. There's no problem with that. I think that there is a tendency to, and I've dealt with it before as well. Like I had a one of the Australian manufacturers give us a batch of protein, and it tasted like very chemically. It tasted like there was soap in the mix or something. And this was coming from me and as the store owner, you know, not even from the customer. And they became very defensive about the product. No, there's no difference in the batch, blah, blah, blah. But this is a protein I'd been using for, 12 months straight. I knew there was a difference. I can taste when someone's put dish soap in my shake. So, that to me was a poor way to deal with that situation. Needless to say, I stopped stocking the brand because I just felt like, well, even if they're told that there's an inconsistency, they're not going to listen. They're going to become defensive. So
that's a good point, actually, mate. Sorry, Troy, go on.
We even find this, like, from time to time, and it's only a couple of times a year, we'll get a little slither of Fonterra bag that makes it through to sieve, because what happens is we load 220 kilo bags to make a batch, and there's electric knives that come down and slash them side to side, and then they empty out. So what happens if those knives get a little bit blunt? Instead of just doing a clean cut, they tend to do a bit of a rip, and you'll get a tiny bit of paper. Not normally a problem is it comes off in a little chunk and it goes through a 2 mil sieve and it catches it. But unfortunately, if it's a little slither and it hits the 2 mil sieve at the end, it goes through the sieve. But people will email and say, hey, I found a little tiny piece of paper, it's a little bit piece of brown bag. I say, yeah, look, unfortunately, all the ingredients come in these brown bags. We use electric knives to cut everything open. If they get a bit blunt, they tend to rip. We change them 3 times a day. But it's always a risk. We do have sieves, and it's funny how people start from that email and respond back, mate, that makes perfect sense. Really appreciate you being honest about this. It's unfortunately part of manufacturing food. You'll find the same thing. Like you'll sieve your cocoa, and sometimes because you're still going through a 2 mil sieve, if the cocoa is a little bit more solid with the cocoa fats, you can get the little cocoa pellets that come through because it pushes it through the sieve instead of breaks in the powder. And people say, oh, I found a couple of little brown dots in there. You go, yeah, if you rub them between your fingers, it'll definitely be cocoa. It's a common thing that happens. People email straight back and say, yeah, mate, rubbed it between my fingers, happy it's cocoa. Yeah, sweet. I've bought a cocoa product and there's a little bit of cocoa. But I think people try to shy away from being honest with customers or just become belligerent, which I understand because nobody likes negative criticism about their brand. But if you Uncle Toby's 28 people in their complaints department that just answer the phone all day long.
When did that change? So you've mentioned there over time, it's a bit of an evolution. I think we spoke just before off air, very briefly, and I think you spoke to. I think we tend to take these things very personally because these projects they're our dream, they're our baby. These things are very. The product, the brand is us for a lot of cases, and a lot of the time, the interactions you're having with stores, it's very much you are the face of your brand. And when you have a product complaint or have a service complaint, it tends to be taken personally and it's something I'd love to know how you, because it sounds like if you've gotten that stage of conflict resolution where you no longer seem to, have a drama with jumping straight into those things or taking on board those sort of issues. How did that change from when you were a smaller brand growing to now where you seem to welcome almost, being able to handle these conflicts to get a better outcome? What changed?
Well, I think a little bit comes with age and time and just the size of the business that we ran now, because, if I had to do what I do now in a day 15 years ago, it would have crippled me. Like I wouldn't be able to do it. So obviously, whilst you can do a lot of courses to help you and stuff like that, really, I think people just evolve as the business load comes on. Like now, we're even thinking, future buying US dollars, because most of our ingredients we buy are in US dollars. Even if we buy Fonterra, it's in US dollars. So, we're thinking 6 months, 9 months in advance of what the US dollar can do. And if we pre-buy currency or hedges, as they say. So there's a lot of aspects of the business that I'm involved in now that I suppose people only see the protein blending or the sups. But the business is so big, like, for example, we have 58 40-foot containers of packaging landing this month. And, it's just the logistics of how we get it in, what's run late, because we've got 2 sites now. We've got an off-site just package storing site. You know, what are we taking out of that? Do we have to store some of the containers as full loads off-site because we're not going to have the room to put it in? How quick are we pulling things through? So there's a lot of logistics and that go on. And whilst Christine and I used to handle it all ourselves, admittedly now we've got 8 people in a team that actually handle purchasing, importing, logistics, all of those. So in the last year, we have actually gone from pretty much being a 2-person show now up to a team of 8, just because we bought some large projects on that are made in Australia for export only, and the scale of those were close to 100 times what we make in a week now.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Troy, I got to say,
optimistic person, so I'm like, yeah, boys, load it on me, I'll make it happen. And then at about the 3-month mark, I noticed that the office was pretty empty and half the staff had left. I'm like, I might be stressing everybody out a little bit.
I got to say, Troy, I just recently bought 10,000 jars from China, and I was biting my nails over that. So I can't imagine all those 40-foot. How with all those containers, with all those shipping containers, how many jars would that be?
Well, to put in relation, we used to do about, let's say, like the American style 5-pound jar that we do mainly for export. We used to be able to do about 3,200 of them a day with the system that we were using, which was a fairly manual system with some automation. When I got this contract for China, I said, let's run it for 6 months in case there's an issue, a hiccup, or we don't get an ongoing contract, because I didn't want to. I had to rebuild part of the factory, knock down rooms, obviously buy the equipment. I didn't really want to do all that if it wasn't going to be an ongoing thing. So we sort of sucked it up for 6 months, and it was a lot of late nights and hard work as such. Then they gave us a 2-year contract. So the second they gave us a 2-year contract, I got my engineer mate that designs all the equipment for me to start working on it. But now we do somewhere between the 12 and 14,000 of those jars a day. Wow. So, you know, on some days, especially with those large jars, it's not hard for us to run through 3 40-foot containers of packaging.
Far out. That would last. That would last me 4 years.
Yeah, you know,
that'd do it.
You know, like just before Christmas, we actually bought our first truck. So now we have a truck where we go pick our own packaging up from site 2 and bring it back to site 1, because it's about 1 kilometre away from where our factory is now. So, you know, when we looked at what we were paying for guys to pick up, you know, 18 pallets at a time and bring it back, we said we might as well just have our own truck. But also, you know, then they stop for smoko or they stop for lunch, and, you know, I've got 40 people in the factory who run out of jars, and they're all standing there staring at me, and I'm like, this truck driver hasn't turned up with the jars. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I'm just really I'd like to see, because I think people would hear these numbers, which are just mind-boggling. Just as a side note, by the way, and I think they would think they see it as the empire it is now, and it's hard to fathom the grassroots start. And I know that I've spent a bit of time visiting accounts around your hometown as well, mate, and I know, you know, there's still stores in there that recall when you used to drive around with protein in the back of the ute and drop it off.
Yeah.
You know, which is still very much what I'm doing now, pretty much as my Monday to Friday. And I think it's awesome to see that the evolution along the way, because I think people get almost disheartened when, like we circled back to the start of the podcast, where people sitting at the base of the hill are looking at the top, and they see a company like yours where you're doing, you know, millions and millions of units, and they, you know, and then they go, God, Troy was just. That's just always been international. You know, that's just what they've always done.
No.
And sure. It's hilarious to remind everyone. I think it's so valuable reminding everyone that it starts at very, like, out of your garage. Most of us started, you know, in a 1-bedroom apartment, you know, packing orders on your dining table, you know, like.
That's it. So look, you know, sort of put in perspective, and also to finish the evolution story, I started putting on reps at the 500 account mark because it just become too much for me. And honestly, at that point, people who knew me then, I probably had a hair trigger. Somebody would look at me sideways in traffic and I'd be out of the car. So obviously, you know, the stress levels were definitely, you know, even anybody in my family that could tell you you'd be having tea, and if somebody screeched on the plate, you know, it might cause a stiff reaction at that time, you know. So when I look back at some of the behaviour that I did then. Probably some of the reps from other companies that badmouthed my company and I choked them at places and stuff like that. I probably look back at that sort of behaviour and go, Jesus Christ. So I started putting on reps, and the funny thing is, whilst I was based in Queensland, the Queensland was the first area I put a rep on, just because I was doing most of the deliveries myself and that. But at that time, I still packed all of the orders myself. So then we put a rep on in New South Wales. At that time, we only had about 14 counts in New South Wales, and Sam Churkop was my first rep down there. He'd come from Tip Top. He played soccer. He took supplements, but wasn't a bodybuilder or anything like that. But by the time he went on to become a real estate agent, he signed up 240 accounts in New South Wales for me over a 2.5 year period. So he was a really good rep. In fact, he sort of
Sam was a good guy. He used to pop into my my old Aussie Supp shop regularly. I used to get along well with Sam.
And the funny thing is, if you look at Sam, he used to send me weekly reports where he had accounts in green, accounts in orange because they didn't do what they did the month before, and accounts in red because they were going cold or they weren't paying their bills and that. And he'd send me this report. And back in these days, you got to realise I didn't know how to use a printer when I started this business, so I had a little bit different than now with the spreadsheets and accounting programs as such. But Sam used to send me this quite detailed report, sometimes 18 to 20 pages. He'd email it through. I'd go, there's an email. I'd go to click it open on my laptop and the phone and ring, Troy, on page 7, did you see this? What do you think about that? And I'd be like, Sam, mate, I'm still reading the first page. But no, look, Sam was a good, hard-working rep. In fact, he was probably just the rep I needed at that time, because not only was he self-motivated and just did his own thing, but he didn't need any management from me, apart from ringing me up saying, hey, this guy wants to do that. What do you think? Should we roll the dice and see if we can get a bit of penetration in his shop? He would never ring me about a conflict with a shop, any problems, anything. He'd just deal with them all himself, and he'd just give me a call report at the end of the week saying dealt. So I've had reps that have been a little bit more needy than that, but thank God it's been further in my progression as a business owner, because if they had been that needy when I was starting the business, I probably wouldn't have been able to handle it. I wouldn't have known how to handle those situations or workload. But to finish the progression story, we sort of grew and grew and grew, and then at the 10-year mark, I'd been going through I'd swapped to a manufacturer in Queensland called All Food Systems, and Steve, I'm still friends with Steve now. In fact, if he gets a big contract that's too big for his business, he'll ring me, and if I get one that doesn't quite fit what we do for volume now, I'll ring Steve and say, hey mate, you want me to connect you with this guy? So at the 10-year mark, we decided, we spoke to Steve, and I said, Steve, mate, I'm getting a lot more orders a month than you can make powder. Is there some way you can shift up, or I'm going to have to look at bringing other manufacturers on? And then Christine and I had the discussion, and she was like, well, why don't we build our own manufacturing plant? And at that time, I hadn't done a lot of food manufacturing, and I was like, the sales I'd never done, and I've got into that, and now you want me to become a food manufacturer? I'm like, and she didn't want to quit her job at that time because she was on a very high-paying job with Parmalat. And when we looked at her wage and what we could possibly pay her out of the business would probably pay her about a fifth of what she was earning at Parmalat as an international employee. Yeah, and I was like, oh, shit. So what she said is, look, we'll get a HACCP expert in, we'll write all the documents, I'll show you how to run the documents and that. I'll come in one day a week, I'll work out with and for the rest of the time, you just run the business. So we started with 5 employees, and we bought another company in that's a shop brand, because when we looked at what we needed, once we set up, we only had about 2.5 days a week work. And then I spoke to this shop brand, and they had about 2 days work. And I go, cool, it means I can employ some full-time employees, and let's get rolling. So we rolled up with 5 employees, and we did that for about 5 years. And then at the 5-year mark, we'd grown and the shop brand had grown, but we also wanted to start to export, because what I noticed is when my brand was small, hardcore users bought it. People would say, oh, do you notice a drop off in winter? I'm like, nah, sell the same middle of winter, middle of summer. They'd be like, oh, we have a 30% drop. And I'm like, nah. Then we got bigger and bigger, and I'm like, geez, we are having a bit of a drop. And, there's only so many times you can watch staff sweep the factory floor in the middle of June before you start to sort of get a bit grumpy about it. So I sort of come up with this plan, because I've been to America and I'd visited a few large manufacturers there, and they were talking about how export works out well for some people, for Australia and New Zealand, because our busy time is when they go into winter and it's their quieter time. So that sort of gave me a little light bulb moment where I go, man, I need to sign up some countries in colder climates, and their spring and summer comes into when my winter is, and that'll even out the factory.
Yep.
You know, the first country we signed up was actually Qatar. And, you know, to have an export license for a dairy product, unless you're involved in food, you don't understand the weight that puts on your business. All of a sudden, you've got 4 people with PhD degrees earning more than you'd ever pay yourself as a director, walking around ticking forms. And whilst they all tell you that money will rain from the sky as soon as you have a dairy export license, there's a good 5 or 7 years between getting that license and actually seeing a return on that license. Now, obviously, the business has seen that return because of all of the export contracts that we have, and also International Protein's seen the growth of, you know, being a huge brand in Singapore, Hong Kong, India. We're actually a well-known large brand now. You know, we do 16 countries, but we have probably what I'd call 5 countries where you'd say they're vibrant. They smash in the 2, 3, 40-foot containers a month order. You know, the other guys might order 5 pallets every 3-4 months.
Yeah. It's really kind of very cool that, you know, before there was this concept that you were going to, you know, be sold in all these different countries. The name was International Protein already, and then it became literally International Protein. But I think I've seen a very cool evolution in the brand just in the time I've been in the industry. So sort of from, you know, the sort of 2010 till now, you know, the brand image has changed a lot. You know, you used to have that very ripped looking kind of torso on the packaging, and I remember in store, like, I loved the brand. Like when I used to sell a lot of International Protein, you know, it was probably the best tasting protein that we'd had at that time. Probably you know, the next runner up was probably Cytec at that time, but people just couldn't believe that you could get a protein to taste like that. That was really the biggest shock at the time, I think, when International Protein was in my store, was that people would try it for the first time and say, wow, this tastes amazing. And I would say, yeah, and, you know, have a look at the macros in this thing as well. It's incredible. But I I occasionally had issues selling it to some girls and stuff like that. And you know, I remember that the branding was very masculine. You know, it was very much, you know, masculine branding. But there's been a shift in the whole look, the whole image of the product. Where did that come from? Is that sort of
originally, because we were both bodybuilders and we were selling to bodybuilding shops, and to be honest, at that time, mainly bodybuilders ate sports supplements. When I looked at, you know, your average tradie, fiery, policeman, they go in there and buy sports supplements, and they go through their 3 kilo tub every week and a half. You know, and when I looked at the female market, the females that did want to buy our product were happy to buy it. The ones that didn't want to buy it were buying the 400-gram tubs, and that they might have 12 grams today. They might not have, you know, they have salmon for lunch tomorrow and don't have a serve. The guys I was selling to will have their lunch and a serve. So when I looked at a business perspective, to market to people that want to buy what you're selling, but also use it at a high rate, was a better business decision. Also, we only had so much money. We, you know, when I looked at guys like Masashi, that already come through the massive margin time of sports supplements down to the lower margin time, because everybody, you know, started giving out larger discounts. No problem with that, because the industry grew 1,000% over that time. But obviously, shops got less margin, manufacturers got less margin, but we sold more products. So I just didn't have the cash flow to actually roll in the TV ads, do the general public. So I sort of had that philosophy. We look at sports supplements as a pie, and that pie is cut up into, let's say, 14 sections. The largest section of actual use of sports supplements would still be from people who see themselves as weight trainers or bodybuilders. You know, we might not actually recognize them as that. They might go to Anytime Fitness twice a week and sit on the treadmill a bit. But if you spoke to them, they will call themselves a serious bodybuilder or weight trainer. that was still where I could sell the most product to. This was before the days of pre-trainers and things like that. You have to realise, we're talking a long time ago where it was before the day of WPI in the market. Believe it or not, you can only get WPC.
Yeah, a long time ago. But
that's a fascinating one. I wanted to circle back just a touch there, because you've touched on a bit of a common theme along there with the human element of the business. And I guess this is something that we've covered in previous episodes too, where I guess, one, you'll see a lot of like lessons in business tend to be universally applicable to most industries, whether they're selling protein or steel or whatever it might be. But the second one is the human resources part. And I want to, when you just sort of segueing back to when you mentioned, for example, when you had Sam, your first sales rep, and he was an independently driven type guy, didn't need much external motivation, that sort of thing, versus those later in the piece, and how to manage these different people. It's something that, both Stu and myself on a much smaller scale have employed people in the past. And I guess a lot of small business owners aren't people who go out, do business degrees, do HR, degrees and learn how to manage people. How did you struggle with that when you first started, and evolving, learning how to actually manage other people under you and be accountable and
yeah.
How did you navigate going for, because you've 55 staff, you've got to be pretty much an expert in technology.
100%. Look, if we touched on HR as a first thing, people have to stop living in the world where they think things are fair. So unfortunately, if you're a boss or you're a senior person in the business, you're expected by the government and the legislation to act in a way that isn't proportionate to the way that you're getting, that somebody might be acting towards you. So let's say, for an example, an employee comes in, swears at you, calls you a thief, slams your door, busts a window, storms out. They've got 5 days to come back and go back to their duty and say, I was just having a bad day, bro. If you come in and you have a bad day and you say an off word and say, mate, you're really shit at your job and I'm going to have to let you go soon, you're making them feel endangered about their employment, and that could actually be an actionable thing you'd go to court for. And you go,
workplace bullying. And
2 days ago, this guy just told me to piss off in much more fragrant terms than that, smashed my window and called me a thief. Can't I just let him go though? Oh, no. So I suppose in your transition as a business, and this is what I'll say to most people, when you have less than 5 staff, you're a family, you're all pulling together, you've all got one ideal, you go out and have dinner together, you have lunch together, if you go down to the shop, you buy them a Coke, you know what I mean? Once you get a little bit above that, you get a few treadmill walkers and that, and a few more problems, a few people that come up to work but don't actually come to work for the benefit of business or even the benefit of themselves. They just turn up to get the wage. Whilst they'll ask you about job fulfillment and other things, they don't do anything to actually fulfill themselves whilst they're at work. Once you get above that, you tend to have to take a step back. And that's what I've done recently in the last 3 years in the business, because you can focus more on running your business rather than growing your business. And that'll be everybody's problem as they grow. That once you're over 12 employees, sometimes you do need to put a layer in where you're getting the cliff notes and the information that comes through, but you're not dealing with the arguments about this guy took my spot in the fridge and that's normally my spot, and this guy parks too close to me. Because once you've dealt with 3 or 4 of them in the morning, it can be really hard to think, hey, I should really ring Stu and get on a podcast and try to promote the brand a bit. You are really focused on that. Why are these people like that? Why are they acting like this? Why aren't they focusing on this? You know what I mean? So you have to separate yourself, and you'll hear this probably from Grant Mayo or anybody that gets to a size. In a middle-sized business, you're in the trenches, you're at war with them, you're pushing it forward, and you can almost see certain aspects of employees as people you need to roll over the top off to get to where you need to get. Once you get a little bit above that, you put a layer in between which can deal with a few of these issues, and you just have the overview, and you sort of see them more as, look, these are just people and they've all got their own little coping skills, and some people don't see the world the way that all of us might see the world. Obviously, we all own businesses and we're all proactive, and we understand there's going to be a little bit of grief for a little bit of pain for a long time gain. Not everybody that you employ has those same coping mechanisms, and that's really what you have to come back to, that everybody sees the world through their own eyes. So when you're dealing with an employee and you've ran a business, or you've developed a certain amount of social skills because all of us do as you get older, or you get more exposed to different things, that person might not be coming at the problem from the same angle you're coming at the problem. So when you're even trying to explain something reasonable, they're just redlining, nah, you're wrong, I don't give a shit, this is what I want. You go, mate, you're asking me for almost double your pay. You're not going to produce any more work, do any overtime. I'm offering you overtime, but you don't want to do the work. Can you see from a business perspective, mate, this isn't a good deal for me? In fact, it's the world's worst deal. And they're just, no, I don't give a shit. I want to buy a jet ski next week because my mate bought one and that's the end of it. Well, I'm not here to support your lifestyle. I'm here to offer you a job and pay you for the work that you do.
Mm.
Yeah, but part of that too is, that's part of the reason why we've got a lot more automation in the factory than what we used to have, because we've got a really good crew of people. We have rotated through a fair few people in the factory. We're in southeast Queensland, and people come here for a lifestyle, probably not for a factory job. So it can be quite hard to fill menial factory jobs. But we seem to have got a really good crew now, and especially through mid last year before we put the automation in, we had to put out a large volume that had to make shipping times. And some people are pulling 12-hour days, and they're almost doubling the output that they were doing in 8 hours in those days to make sure the containers go out and that. And I suppose as a boss, you sit there and you go, geez, I can see them getting more and more worn down every day, a little more snappy, bigger bags under the eyes. They don't deal with problems as well. But managing staff will probably be the biggest joy and heartache that you'll ever have in your business. Because you'll have some staff, like, we legitimately have some staff that have gone through drug rehabilitation, come to work for us, that are now team leaders and stuff, that have progressed over 5 years with the business, got married, had a kid, buying a house, got a nice car, really got their life on track. And then we've had some other staff that for some reason, no matter what, you could wash their car when they turn up to work every morning, they wouldn't be happy. So, and they can really cause you some grief. But what I will suggest to people is don't put management layers in early in your business. The benefit to growing any business, and you guys will know because you've gone out and sold brands, is walking in a shop and the shop owner knows that you've got skin in the game. You love that brand and you'll be passionate about it. And actually, if he rings you at 10 o'clock at night and says, I forgot to order something, you'll probably still pick up the phone and say, mate, I've got a notepad next to bed. I'll just write your order down and send it out in the morning. What I notice in Australia is a lot of people chase the easy money, but they don't look at the downside. So let's say there's nothing wrong with distributors, but a distributor rep can only sell so much. So if a distributor has 6 or 7 brands and you're going to put another brand on them, that rep can still only sell a certain amount to a shop and can still only work so many hours a day. But people say, but it's easy because then they do the work and I just go out and have lunches with the bigger accounts and stuff like that. You go, but what you also never get is that one-on-one friendship with the shop owner, which does develop over time, where he looks after your brand and he knows what your brand's about and he can ring you with any little problems and you work them out. You don't get that with a distributor. So whilst using a distributor is easier, you're not actually growing your own business. Mm. Also, what you do have, if you decide to swap distributors, you don't have any relationship with any account.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting point because, I know, for me, I was dealing with probably my favorite rep that I've ever dealt with. And he was working for one of the big Australian distributors. And he moved to a much smaller one, a guy out of Melbourne. And I followed the rep and I ditched the old brands and I took on all the new brands that the rep, had now taken on. So it's so true in what you're saying. And Will, I think that that there's something to be said for exactly what Troy's talking about now, because you're doing exactly what Troy's saying with your business. So, Troy, I'm sure you've seen and heard a little bit about Promobolics and about what Will does, but Will is basically like the traveling salesman. He's on the road at least 6 months of the year. He's in shops. He's talking to people. He's meeting people. His account list has grown exponentially almost. But a lot of people don't see the footwork that Will does and the fact that he's out there building that. There's a lot of lonely hours on the road with, country music stations playing and whatnot. So,
Actually, thank you very much, Stu. I think that's incredibly valuable, Troy. You have to be. You're not replaceable. You can have a proactive sales rep who's good at building rapport, but no one's going to replace, Troy walking and selling a bag of amino charged OPI versus me doing it, say, in a store on your behalf. But one thing that we came up with, and we hit a wall at actually on the last episode, was the next step. And you're probably one of the few people who have transcended that in the Australian industry. And I'd love to pick your brain on this. So when you, at what point and how did you overcome that? Where obviously you started with the grassroots approach, doing very much how I'm trying to grow my brand, where you're visiting store to store and you have personal relationships with these people. They actually become part of your circle, and you're known as the brand. And then as the business scales and you get to a point, like you said, at that, when you had 500 plus accounts, like, I'm at about a third of that, and I'm really, really, the workload's quite crippling, trying to dispatch all those orders and do, do everything, and it comes to mind. But how do you get past that point where you go, the brand is Troy, but at some point Troy needs to work on the business, not in the business, but stepping away, you risk detracting some of that, time in store and building the rapport and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So how does a business do that? Because so many small businesses are there,
I was probably lucky when I did it, because at the time that I did it is when we started manufacturing our own product. So I would have a lot of guys, a couple of major accounts in Sydney rang and said, "Oh, what, you're not good enough to come and visit me anymore?" I said, "No, literally, because at the time when we started manufacturing ourselves, I was the blender." And wow. I'm like, no, mate, I pretty much do three blends. Then they didn't have to be girls, but they happened to all be girls. I said, then the girls will pack those blends out. I said, in the time that they pack them out, I race up and process a few more orders and that for the guys to pick downstairs, because I was doing all the order processing myself. I said, so it's not that I'm neglecting you. It's legitimately I'm making the stock that you're ordering now. And they're like, "Oh, cool. Oh, so what?" So I suppose I engaged the shops in what the progression of the business was. And that was even when export took off for us, probably, like it dribbled along for a while, but probably about 3.5 years ago, it really took off, where, now export for international product makes about 45% of our turnover. Mm. So, when export started taking off, I suppose, because I post on social media, "Hey, I'm in India, I'm in this town," they've happened to put me on the news, of course, 2 seconds after a training session when everybody else is wearing a suit. And I'm in a T-shirt and a sweaty pair of shorts. Thanks, boys. Yeah, like, why did you all rock up in suits? But I suppose, and then when I get back, I'll get a lot of, social media. I suppose I'm not that big on building my own brand on social media. I'm more focused on the actual brand. But I do get, like, when I'm overseas, you'd be surprised, I would get close to 600 to 700 messages from shop staff, shop owners. Hey, bro, my cousin comes from that area," or, "Hey, I seen you there. It's amazing. It's amazing to see that, an Aussie brand's actually out in the middle of such and such a country." So people do actually get excited about that journey and see that we've grown with them. But legitimately, if a shop owner has a problem or a shop owner wants to order and hasn't been able to get a rep, they'll still ring my mobile phone. I'll be in the office and still take the order down and process the order. So I suppose I haven't stepped away. Like some business owners say, "No, I don't do that. I'm above that." If somebody, even if somebody, let's say, we're at just at the northern end of the Gold Coast, if somebody in the southern end of Brisbane rings me and says, "Oh man, I forgot to order a couple of chocolate WPIs," I'll be like, "Mate, I've got 15 minutes. I'll just chuck in the car and race around now, and then I'll be back in the office, and I'll ring a couple of people on the hands-free, of course, when I'm in the car." So I suppose I still connect with shop owners, and they still, or shop staff, they still see that I'll still give them the same services I used to give them, even if I'm not the actual person walking in the store.
Mm. Yeah, got you. So
and that's probably something. That's something somebody should look at. I don't really know always why we have the success we have. Sometimes I just go, it's probably because we do a 4 days work every day of the week. We're not in Thailand laying on a beach getting a suntan, trying to think about how to run our business better. I'm probably the guy taking the market share off all the guys that are resting up to think about how to run their business without stress. I'm like, I just eat stress for breakfast, and I'll just run the business. And hopefully, if, without being cheeky, if I'm counting the money with a rake at the end of the day, I'm probably going to be happy and not worry about the stress. So that. And that's what people have to look at business like. People go, "Oh, you're an overnight success." I said, "Yeah, 22 years in the making, this overnight success." But when I look at what's happened in our business, it's almost happened in 5-year chunks. Like, this has happened, took 5 years to take the next step, 5 years to take the next step. unfortunate with people, they have these business plans and they're amazing business plans, and they'll come and show me, you know, they want me to make their brand, and for some reason they show me their whole accounting program and their business plan. I'm like, if you order the stock and you pay the bill, that's really my end of the deal here. But you know, and their 1 year projection plan almost has a company yacht at the end of the year, and I'm like, geez, I didn't pay myself a wage for the first 2.5 years. Are you joking? Like I hope that happens for you, but you might be setting the bar a little bit high. Or, you know, you notice people, the second meeting they come in once they've launched their brand, they'll come in from meeting with us. They already bring in three staff and a general manager. And I'm like, oh mate, I hate to break it to you. When you launch a business, as you boys know, I go, you chain to it like a dog to a kennel for the first 10 years. In fact, you don't even take a holiday or have a break.
I think that a lot of people now, being that there is a really broad selection of contract manufacturers in Australia, I think people have this idea about supplements. Sorry, just give me a second. I think people think that supplements are really high margin products. There's this belief, the consumer believes that they're these hugely inflated items, that there's all this money to be made in. And I think people think you can just come out with a brand and people are going to pick it up. And it doesn't work that way. You know, I've seen people do it really, really well. And I've seen people do it really, really badly. Like, you know, the shirt that I'm wearing, the guys at Red Dragon Nutritionals, I'm inspired by those guys, you know, all the time. Like that to me, they've done it. They've done everything right from square one. They haven't pushed the business to grow too hard. Started as, you know, as one guy selling it out of his stores, and, you know, grew it into a distribution model, and now having a rep that's an amazing rep, by the way.
But what you've really got there is three guys that are super passionate about what they do. You know, Reese is super good on his accounts, knowing his margins, knowing what he can do. Ryan's really good at selling, and Jared's really good at formulating. So you've got the perfect storm to make a business there. I think what happens in Australia, and I see this, you know, 3 or 4 times a month, somebody contacts, says, hey, can I drop in for a 15-minute meeting? I want to launch a supplement brand. They go, I want to launch a protein powder. I said, oh, do you want just the WPI? Do you want a WPC? Do you want some casein in there? You after a blend? What are you after? And they go, I don't know the acronyms you're using right now. And I'm like, wow.
So you shouldn't be launching a protein.
I don't mean to be rude, but what protein content do you want? I don't know. What do you think? I said, well, hey, mate, before you launch a brand, you need to know enough about the actual thing that you're going to launch to even be convincing to sell it to shops. I go, but you also should know what your story is. Like each product we launch, and we have a reason behind it that we can tell the reps. That then when the shop says, well, why do you do this? We go, oh, we do that for such and such, you know, like a little bit of extra arginine in our WPI because it's a recovery product to help with growth release and stuff. So we have a little reason why we actually do things. Yeah, and unfortunately in Australia, sometimes we have the ideal product we'd like to launch, but following the Fazan's food law and everything else makes it very, very hard to get on the market. You know,
I think it's an interesting thing that you said with your reason for bringing that product to market. And this is what I've told a couple of buddies of mine who have come to me and said, Stu, I want to do a pre-workout. And I said, well, what's your reason? Where's the gap? What are you trying to do? What's different that you're doing? And they're like, what do you mean, what's my reason? I want to make money. And I'm like, if your reason for doing it is to try and make money, you're doing a startup in the wrong industry. Yep. You know, like, yeah, you might make some money down the track, but, you know, you really got to be looking for doing something better than someone else, or doing something different to what someone else is doing, or there's got to be a reason for that product to exist, or people don't have a reason to buy that over, you know, Warhammer. Like if you've got Warhammer sitting there that people already know and people are already buying, and then you've got, you know, Uncle Stu's pre-workout formula, and it's got the exact same ingredients at the exact same dosages. Which one are they going to grab? You know, it's
Oh, look, and yeah, it is a funny thing in this industry because you get the people who know nothing about it, and like I love to ride motorbikes, but I'm not a mechanical engineer. I'm not a, you know, metallurgist or anything else. So I'm not designing my own frames. I'm not making my own motors at home. I'm not doing anything else. I go to Harley and just give them a shitload of money to make me a bike that hopefully starts every day. You know? So because they're experts in what they do, and I would never think of entering that field because I'm not an expert in it. So there are a lot of people who start brands, as you say, because they eat supplements, but they're not supplement people, they're not food people, they don't understand food regulations, food law. Like in Australia, I don't think, like you'd be lucky to count on one hand companies that understand the TGA, FSANs, sports supplement, and caffeinated beverage rules. We actually have 6 people working in our quality control department. 2 of them workers on floor taking testing samples, all those sort of things. The other 4 working compliance and legislation, and still, with the grey, and we probably shouldn't use the word grey, it's black and white, but with the way many things are written, it's so open to interpretation. And then there's bizarre things like, say, as you all know, Dynamine's just become an illegal product in Australia. In fact, you probably get a visit from the federal police if you want to use it. And yet it's on the approved for sport list as a non-testable product that's safe. So and yet Teacrine, and personally, whilst most people prefer Dynamine over Teacrine, I actually prefer Teacrine just because of a longer lasting sort of stimulant effect in it. So I find that Dynamine sort of crashes me after a while, where the Teacrine doesn't. But that's another story in formulation, I suppose. But you go Teacrine, very similar product, but lasts for 6 to 8 hours in the body, is perfectly fine and legal to use. Dynamine is not. You go, where's the TJ coming up with these things?
And look, I think anyone who's run when you said before, shying away from stress, looking for that, pay yourself straight away, trying to find the easiest way to run a business. Like 9 times out of 10, it's just blunt force trauma, just rocking up and just putting it in. And that's where people like RDN and stuff, like those lads, I know that Reese is a freak. He's a workhorse, man. Like anyone who's growing a brand, anyone who's done well in a business, you can guarantee they've hurt themselves. They've traded in years of social life, years of or having one. Relationships have struggled. Like people put a lot of skin in the game if you've done it genuinely. But I think what's comforting though is, like you've said, with some of those examples where people came to the factory not even knowing the product they wanted to make, to bring to market and represent. Like the saturation has never been higher, but the passionate, informed, educated people behind it, those are the guys that will stick around and make the brands that last a decade. So it's sort of like there's more competition than ever, but it's not really competition. If if you're just confident in your craft and you just put the time in, you'll like every industry has this, where you'll have immense amounts of competition, but you'll still see 2 or 3 guys, companies really striving. And you're like, what's the difference? They're selling a near identical product. Like all 3 of us right now, we have all sold in either retail or wholesale protein powder, for example, but lo and behold, here, everyone's at different points of it, right? Like, it's a bit purely because of how, at some point the application speaks louder than I think other space,
And thankfully for us, Australia, it's really just this year that we have. I employed a person in my business to start working on Google reviews and stuff like that, because, it makes me laugh because I spoke to a couple of contractor companies where you pay them a fortune to do it, and they're like, "How do you sell a product when you have 2 Google reviews in 4 years?" I'm like, I don't know, mate. I just let me click on accounting. 14,000 chocolate WPI 3 kilos last month sells. So I suppose there's 2 aspects to every business now. There's the reality of what's happening, and there's the perception of what's happening. So as you get bigger, you have to sort of massage both. When I was smaller, I'm like, I don't care if nobody's ever heard of me, as long as the sales come in and the shops are supporting me and the people who buy it like it. Obviously, then you get to a certain size and you don't want to see the ebbs and flows, and you have to start to count on those things. But I do have a lot of people who contact us now who are SEO experts, according to themselves, and things like that just think that that's going to make the difference. Okay, it doesn't matter how good you do that if you can't get the shops to stock it, and the shops don't want to give you a front page every now and then and things like that. Okay, we're a good example of we're probably 15 years behind the curve when it comes to internet marketing or anything like that, and we're just sort of getting into it now, even though we've seen a good response from getting into it because the brand has a presence. But now a lot of people are almost shying away from the grassroots 1970s, knock on a door, shake a hand, bring the shop owner a coffee if he drinks coffee, and talk about the product and see if he can help you launch it. You know,
amen, fucking amen, man. That is so bloody true.
Because you can get 100 emails a day with amazing marketing in them, but who really reads them? You just click it where somebody walks in and you connect with them and you're passionate with them. You go, yeah, I'll actually give you a chance, mate. Chuck 15 tubs on the shelf and we'll see how it goes. To do that via email is virtually impossible. Especially in Australia.
Trust me, I've tried. I would love to be going around to stores, but because I'm tied to my retail side of things, I can't do it. So I'm therefore forced to use technology to try and do it, which is frustrating for me at times because I'm a personable person. I like connecting with people. I like talking to people. I like meeting to people. I mean, the phone, I guess, is probably my most powerful tool at the moment. I prefer that to email and to, like you said, these digital marketing strategies. I find a phone call to be
100% the
more
phone
effective tool to me.
And I actually said this, like the first time I ever did the Sydney Fitness Expo back in the day when it was a monster expo and there'd be like 100,000 people queued out the side to get in. We got to a size and I thought, I'll do the Sydney Fitness Expo. And it was a great expo for us. We signed up a lot of accounts on the trade days and, it sort of got a lot of connection with people. But the funny thing was I had people like Lucky from Adrenaline HQ and people like that I met at the Sydney Fitness Expo that I've been dealing with for 5 years over the phone that I'd feel I was personal friends with because I'd speak to them twice a week, speak to them Tuesdays and Thursdays to see if they need an order. And it was funny where we'd have that laugh and you go, this is the first time I actually walked you. Like you come up and say to me, hey mate, is Troy here? Because a little bit before I got a Facebook account and stuff, I'm like, yeah, that's me, mate. So 100% that phone contact with people and and anybody can take a lesson out of this. I used to have all the accounts that could get delivered in 2 days and all the accounts that get delivered from 1 day from my point in Queensland. And on Wednesday I would ring all my Victorian accounts and New South Wales accounts and say, hey, do you think you need anything for the weekend? And it was a point in time, and people would say, I don't really need anything, but let me have a look. Give me 4 chocolates, 2 strawberries, this, you get off the account with you get off the phone with a nice little order. And then my Queensland accounts, I'd ring on Thursdays because I would obviously get the stock in Fridays and Saturday were the big sales days back then. So, and I used to speak to other people, whether it be an old Musashi rep or anything like that, or a Max's rep, and that's like, I just visit the accounts once every three months. I go, but you ring them once or twice a week. And they're like, no. I'm like, it's a good idea. Please don't start ringing them. So it's surprising that constant contact, but also what you do get then, is you get the staff member you might not have met, and for me, I'd be, hi, this is Troy from IP. I'm just seeing if you need any top-ups for the weekend. They go like, I don't, but I had a customer ask me this question.
Yeah.
So you'd have that quick 1 minute and you'd be like, this is the reason we do that, and that's this and such, and they get off the phone with some confidence about the brand. And then I'd visit them after a couple of months, and they'd be selling IP hand over fist with more confidence than probably my own staff could, because they'd ask all those little questions along the way. So it's all those little 1%ers that actually make your business successful. People think it's the big 80% move that makes a change. It's all the little 1%ers that add up.
Yeah, getting that weekend casual and having a 10-minute convo with them, giving them a few different ways of going, hey, what's not selling, what is selling. And again, this is all stuff for our listeners now that are tuning in, that it could be stuff that you can take across any industry right now. This isn't purely supplements. Like this is just sales 101 really, but or even building your own product 101. That's the irreplaceable part, isn't it, of where you step in. And I think you answered it quite nicely, full circle, that at some point you have to step away from being in the trenches to work on it versus in it. But if you always have that, if you can always offer that part of the service where there's still someone can ring you and ask you about your product and you can tell them why it's made how it is, or, hey, Lucky, I'm seeing sell through on, WI this month's a bit slow. What issues you're running into and help it. And I guess, I think everyone, what I find amazing is that we get to do with, these hundreds of people that are all like-minded like us. Like they're all time poor, very stressed, and they've got to try and meet numbers every week. So you're almost trying to make it as easy as possible for them to make their living. And I think with these stressed, time poor guys, and if you actually sit there and go, hey man, how's your business run? Who's your demographic? Like who actually comes in each day? Like what what's your business look like? How's it? How long you been there for? Oh, that's 5 years. Wow, you've probably had some hard months then. Well, what's that look like? And all of a sudden they get really passionate and they stop being stressed and passive aggressive and just looking for a PO, and they start going, oh, I started a few years ago, and funny story, did it out of my garage, and which it seems to be everyone has, which is I guess the social media misconception that we all started in Lamborghinis and stuff. It's all been done out of the back seat of a car at one stage or another. And I think and when you speak with people who have been doing it a long time, that breaks away a lot of it. I think when you get back to them and you actually just go, hey, how's your business work? When you have genuine interest in what makes them tick, the rest, it really transcends, I think, a lot of the actual sales part. Like, it's a lot more important, I think, because that's our all common denominator. I think when you talk about rapport, relationship build, I think we're all in it because generally people who want to start a business are typically driven. They want to try and they might be very, very much self-motivated. They're types of people who have got a lot of discipline too, because you've got to be able to go a long time without much reward, especially
100%.
or no pay for your first. I didn't take a wage for 2 years either, Troy.
I think that's all of us. And then the first wage we probably paid ourselves was about 17 grand a year.
Yeah. Isn't it funny though, that misconception? Like people think they can avoid that hurt period, but I know we try, we touch it on almost every guest we've gotten on, and they've all come from different walks of life. We've had other people who are running large companies like yourself, like the Aaron Singermans of the world. We've had some really great guests on formulators. We've had some great
Grant Mayo. We've had
who's
ran it from the retail side on a big scale as well, and that seems to be a real commonality between all of them. It is just that fact that they've put in the work. They haven't had a big fanfare about it, but it's just been years and years of grind that they've.
And I think if it's within your power, make things easy on people. And that's, I suppose, because I've done everything from pack the pallets, load the trucks, do the blending. So even when we're pitching for international contracts, and I might be on a line sometimes with 20 or 28 quality and legal people in Canada or America, and they're firing questions, I can say, no, this happens on a pallet. This is why we do it like that. That's the reason we stack like that. But it gives them confidence. And they go, how do you know this? I go, because I've done it for 20 years and I actually stack the pallets. So, and that comes back down to knowing your business. And I see this with shop owners. There's a lot of shop owners, they start and they do great graphics. Everything's amazing. And you go, yep, you got balloons out the front on your open day and, it looks nice. And, you'll pick colours that women will come in and purchase and mums. And so you're not just pitching to hardcore bodybuilders, great. Second week, I put this good little manager in there. He's a Supp genius. And I meet the guy and he's effervescent, he's great, he's personable. I think, Jesus Christ, if you don't work out here, I might give you a job. Huh. And, 5 months down the track, he opens a shop 4 doors down. And then the guy whinges and I go, well, mate, how you run a business? And the actual shop owner, the investor, doesn't even know how to put anything through the till. Doesn't know what he's buying, what the person. I said, mate, the trouble is when you let somebody else totally run your business and they run it really well, if they've got half a brain, they'll work out they can step out and run their own business just as well. So, some of us are lucky in business. We always get those people that are massively overachieving for the skill set that they've had, but they haven't got the confidence or the mental structure to handle the stress. And all of us, if we're honest, they're gold for your business. The person that comes in and you go, gee, you could really have been a high court judge or something, but for some reason you just want to be a production manager.
Well, that's Will for me. So I have a guy who's basically my right hand man. His name's Will. And he is that guy, but he got to a point where he was starting to strive for a little bit more. So I allowed him to invest into a piece of my companies, so that he can, branch out and make a little bit more money than an average employee would, because I didn't want to lose him, and also I didn't want to compete against him. So we've just done a second location that he's the co-owner of. He's happy, I'm happy, and I hang on to him.
What you will find is that'll be very gratifying for you as he develops that business and grows that business, and that you've taught him some of the skills and you see him develop as a person. As a boss and owner and then a business partner to people, that is actually something that you do take a lot of I suppose, personal pride out of, that you see some of the workers that you put a lot of time in, you might send them the courses because you see weaknesses in their personality or the way they deal with conflict, and you actually do some capital investment in giving them some skills, and you actually see that change, not only the way they work with you, the way they deal with their kids, the way they deal with their wife or their husband. And you go, geez, I actually had a massively positive effect on this person's life. Yeah, that's actually something that you can take out of running your business. And I've had people now work for me, got some employees 12, 14 years, and I've seen, some of them I've just supplied a stable job for those 12 or 14 years, and, the staff lunches every month, they know how to set the tables up and what we normally buy. Easy, and they haven't wanted to go on. And some other employees, after a certain amount of time, might be a couple of years out, to build up enough confidence, hey, I'd like to take this step. How do we do that? And I said, look, you haven't quite got the education base of that. Maybe I can support some half a day off a week to go to, some extended English lessons, things like that, because not a lot of my employees are Australian born.
Mm-hmm.
When you come to manual labour in this part of Queensland, a lot of them will be Chinese, Brazilian, from countries.
And obviously that's just out of people who are applying for those roles as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, you tend to find a lot more of them people apply for those roles. And I've found that too with menial sort of labour type jobs. I was a landscaper for a long time, and in that industry, you just had a lot of people applying for, the labourers. That's
Well, of course, because for a lot, like, I've even got a couple of people that work on my line that are one of them, Shin Lee. She's actually a maths professor, but when she immigrated here from her part of China, her qualifications weren't recognised. So she's got kids, everything else, and she just needs a job. But you were not funny for somebody who comes from a non-manual working background. She's probably my hardest working. In fact, the most over hear from her in a very strong Chinese accent is "mop outer." Because what'll happen is a couple of the boys will go for lunch, go up to KFC or something, and she hasn't got a forklift ticket.
Yeah.
So she can't pull the next lot of powder down. She'll scream, "Mop outer, mop outer."
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, look, Troy, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this morning.
Yep.
And I think we're kind of getting to that point on the clock where we might wrap it up. Is there anything that you can kind of? Is there any kind of hints you can drop to us about what's next for International Pro Team? Maybe a product that's coming, or anything that we should be looking forward to?
We're not too far off launching a yogurt powder. So it'll be a high protein yogurt, healthy gut. Much along the lines of the casein custard dessert style products, but it's actually yogurt. It's not casein for those people that shy away from casein. We're not launching it because the product is very good. We're not launching it because there's been a huge request for it in here in Australia, but we will launch it. We're launching it because we've got a massive request coming out of Singapore and Hong Kong for it. And I'm like, guys, I'm busy doing other stuff. I'm super busy. And they're like, we'll order a 40-foot container for each country. I'm like, in that case, let me start working on it today. So when it comes to the manufacturing side, we obviously did a fair bit of automation and changing last year when it comes to the protein powder side. We have had, as I was saying to Will before we started, our manufacturing stretched to the max now. The Australian brands we make for, because we're making for 18 different brands now, as well as our export has just gone berserk with the TGA regulations changing, and also the COVID shipping sort of slow down. So a lot of companies are looking at the cost of bringing things in, and also the time where that used to come in 4 to 6 weeks, and now they're saying 3 months and things like, just saying, look, we have to get it made in Australia. So it's seen a lot of work come on to us. So in mid-February, we're actually putting a full auto line in to pack pre-trainers, because the trouble with pre-trainers is, as you'd all know, they don't like heat. They tend to get sticky or not. So we've had a specifically designed auto line where it's got a low friction auger that fills the jars for us. So at the moment, we do about 5,000 a day when we're packing them flat out. once we put this auto line in, we'll be able to do about 14,000 a day of them. So that'll free up a little bit of production space. But the boys from Red Dragon and a few other guys have already kindly sort of put in POs to take up almost that extra space we're going to make. So, you know, for us, you know, when it comes to the small tubs, we were doing most of them manually. So, you know, that'll be good for the workers, because now what's quite a strenuous and stand behind them with a whip sort of day will turn into a just watch it go along the line day and make sure that no red lights go off.
Yep.
So,
and you've got a bunch of I just wanted to touch on this because it's something I always love watching the videos of, like, all these automated machines you've got in there now. Like, Troy's just, for those of you who don't know, Troy's just like completely upgraded his facility, and he's got all these machine lines, like these labeling machines and, you know, auto filling machines, and like the jar basically, you know, you put it on the start of the line, right? And by the time you get it out the end of the line, it's a finished product.
yeah, finished,
Almost no human interaction now.
So
you can it's a really beautiful thing to watch.
Auto labeler is, we have a couple of customers. Most of our customers do shrimp sleeves on the large jars, but we have a couple that have got on the labels. And now the auto filler does about 14,000 jars a day of the 5-pound tubs. We found, because when it's shrimp sleeves, it's super easy for us. The shrimp sleeve tunnel could probably handle double that. But when it comes to labeling, we had a semi-auto labeler. So it's an automatic labeler, but you have to take the jar off, put it on there and press the button. And then we noticed we can only do about 7,000 a day manually.
Yep.
So obviously I went off and got it designed, that labeling machine. But yeah, that is a dream. Well, it's also a dream because on social media it looks amazing.
It does. It's really cool to watch. You can fall asleep to that thing. Just
because you get some machines that do an amazing job but just don't look exciting, and then you get other machines like labelers that pick up a jar, turn a jar around, put a label on, put the jar back down. You go, it's probably not that fancy machine, but actually looks like it's doing something really, really important as such. Yeah.
Well, I've noticed that RDM's utilised a few videos of those those machines, and it just looks great, especially for new products coming out. And we're seeing almost like we're seeing the production line of this new product before we've even seen it on the shelves. It's like, ooh, what's that? And you're trying to read it as it spins past and the labels get pulled onto it. Very, very cool stuff. I love it.
Mate, I think this has been and a man as busy as yourself, Troy, we've been very lucky to have an hour and a half of your time this morning before everything kicks off. And I really am thankful, because I think we've pulled out a lot of really, I guess, lessons that we've seen across our host of guests from different walks of life as well. But they all have the same sort of commonalities that have all been very, very valuable for our listeners who are you know, mostly business and fitness minded, about being, you know, you have to do the grassroots yourself. At some point, you have to be, you know, it's very important for you to know your business inside and out. And by all accounts, you know, you really can't sort of substitute that part of the business at any stage. And I think that content's will be of great value for people, mate. So I wanted to say thank you very much for giving us, you know, so much of your time this morning, with how much you've got going on there now. Just getting a brief insight just makes me stress listening to it. So I think we'll, without further ado, mate, we'll let you resume your hectic day. And look, just thanks again, mate, for coming on and sharing some of those pearls of wisdom today.
Okay, thanks, guys.
See you later, Troy.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Cheers.